Welcome to the video on degrees of freedom and information processing teaching a golf swing. I am Ian Smith. This is for Sports and Health Science 502. Topics being covered in this video will be freezing degrees of freedom, which joints are frozen and why, order of release, as well as information processing, including short-term working memory and long-term memory and retrieval. When evaluating the swing of a novice player, we should first observe the swing from beginning to end. This will help us understand in what ways we can help the athlete improve their performance. Using Bernstein's theory of degrees of freedom, we instruct the learner to immobilize or freeze certain joints. This allows them to focus on the motion of just one part of the swing. Doing this allows them to process information and store it in their short-term or working memory. As the learner continues through these repetitions, more degrees of freedom can be unfrozen or released. As we see, the shoulders are released in this case to allow for follow-through in the swing. Once the learner goes through repetitions with only the wrists and shoulders, the final degree of freedom to be released is in the hips. Going through the stages of freezing degrees of freedom multiple times allows the learner to process the information of each part of the swing and store it in their short-term or working memory and eventually into their long-term memory for retrieval. As the learner continues to go through these stages of freezing and unfreezing degrees of freedom, their ability to recall the sensation of correct motion improves and becomes more autonomous. While still in a cognitive stage of learning, a novice still may be able to associate certain motions with correct or incorrect schema. As an instructor, it is most important to ensure that the learner is aware of what joints must be frozen and the reasons why. In doing so, an instructor is able to help the learner understand what is good habit and bad habit. One of the degrees of freedom that was not discussed previously is the head and neck. The reason that this degree of freedom is so important is that the golfer may lose track of the ball when following through with his swing. This is one more instance where an athlete can learn bad habits if an instructor is not careful. This also helps the learner filter information through the swing. When focused on where the ball will be instead of where the ball is, the learner is not filtering the information correctly. To demonstrate the importance of freezing degrees of freedom, we will now focus on the wrists. As demonstrated, as the wrist cock backwards, the club must stay aligned with the ball. It is through this repetition and freezing of degrees of freedom that a golfer is able to feel how the club head should align in their backswing. Looking at the athlete from a different angle helps us to analyze the swing from front to back. As we see in these repetitions, all degrees of freedom have been released. The wrists, shoulders, hips, as well as head and neck are open to move through the backswing as well as the follow-through. It is important to note that as our novice returns to freezing degrees of freedom, the instructor must ensure that he is freezing all joints. As we see, the shoulders dip when they should remain motionless. Although this may not seem like a large problem initially, if an instructor does not catch it, it may turn into a bad habit. Once all degrees of freedom have been released, and the learner is able to practice the full range of motion, over time, the athlete's skill will appear more fluid. This is due to the skill set moving from their working or short-term memory to their long-term memory, where they are able to retrieve it at any time. As the athlete continues to progress, it is important for the instructor to introduce versions of variability, including different clubs as well as different lies. As the learner continues to practice, it is important that the instructor correct any errors or mistakes made by the learner. Once again, ensuring that we evaluate every angle of an athlete's swing, we need to make sure that we evaluate it from the front as well. This ensures that as the athlete swings forward and follows through, the club is remaining aligned with where the ball is, as well as the club head being in the correct position. Once again, freezing the degrees of freedom as we analyze the golfer's swing can assist them with this aspect of their swing. As the novice continues to practice, his swing will increase with speed as well as accuracy. However, it is important for an instructor to ensure that if it is necessary for the athlete to go back and retrace or refreeze degrees of freedom to exercise more of that working memory until they are able to recall it fully, it is important that an instructor is able to communicate this with the athlete. Through this process, the athlete is able to improve their skill, and an instructor is able to see the skill improved as the learner's ability increases, and they are able to use only their long-term memory to recall the skill.